All right, so bottom two lines, page 16, Torah Or. So we're saying that when a person is occupied the whole day in physical matters, in the burdens of making a living, which is called darkness, right? Because you have to basically disconnect your meditative state. Godliness, Hashem is like forcing you to go into the 6 days of the work. You can't stay in your, divine consciousness when you're busy shoveling, whatever it is. You're in the darkness. But the point is that afterwards you do a little meditation, b'tefillah, in your davening. And we said the davening again is like Noah's Ark, right? You basically, Shabbos is either the Shabbos of the future, Yom Shakulo Shabbos, or the Shabbos of the 6 days of the week, and then there's Shabbos. Or we said that every little day has a little miniature Shabbos in it, which is like the Noah's Ark. And you find yourself after a whole difficult day when you were torn away from divine consciousness, after you left, and now you go afterwards into your davening. And this is your meditation. So the next part of this mimer is basically just a meditation of what one is thinking in their davening after being stripped away from godliness due to his parnasa issues. So he said, this is what you're thinking. You're thinking how there's no blade of grass down below. It doesn't have a mazel upon it that stands over it and strikes it and tells it to grow. This is like from the Gemara, just a realization that there's nothing in this world that's just sort of got here independently. Everything is like hishtalshlus from some spiritual descent until it ultimately materializes. And this goes on every single blade of grass. Shema mazalos, shema mashpim chayus kol olam hazeh. And when it says it has a mazel above it, what is this mazel? So quite literally, it's not just a spiritual thing which we call a mazel. It's actually the mazalos, which is the planets and the stars and the solar system. People don't really realize, as far as what the Torah considers to be the truth, is that everything in this world is guided by the stars. In other words, it says that by Avram Avinu, right, that he was able to understand the movement and the decision and the character and the quality of every single country, every single person, every single activity that was going to go on just from studying the stars. Because basically this whole business of the stars is just this complex, visual experience of how Hashem filters his life force into this world. We just sort of look up and see the stars today. We don't even have this concept in our minds in like a scientific world that we came into, because really this wisdom has essentially been lost. But in the ancient days, people were literally able to read the stars and know what was going to happen, right? Actually, we just came on Parshas Lech Lecha today, so there's a piece of Chazal that says, where does Lech Lecha come from? In other words, if you read at the end of Parshas Noach, there's not like a whole lot of build-up. It's like, okay, Avram was born, he travels with his father. All of a sudden, it's like Hashem speaks to Avram, Lech Lecha. It kind of comes out of nowhere, and then the whole story becomes a story of Avram for the next 3 parshas. So what happened directly before Hashem told Avram, Lech Lecha? Does anyone know this?
The Mazel.
What about the Mazel?
With Avram looking at the stars and seeing that seeing his destiny. And then seeing that he's like realizing that Hashem is in charge of the whole thing, and
he realized
he's not bound to his mazel.
Not exactly, close. He realized that he basically became the master of all the mazalos in a way that no one ever had. He sort of outdid everyone in his generation. That's why his name Avram is actually a Kabbalistic meaning. It was Av. What is Av? Father. Father is another way of saying Chokhmah. Ram means exalted. So he was like the most exaltedly wise man in the world. And he came to the realization, as I said, he could figure out every single thing from looking at the stars. He knew everybody's life pattern and trajectory and everything, except he realized there was one mazel that he didn't understand, and that mazel was actually responsible for all the other ones. And when he came to this realization, Hashem came to him basically and said, Lech Lecha, that's the mazel of Eretz Yisrael. In other words, you're looking at all the mazalos of the rest of the world. The mazel of Eretz Yisrael is the one which all the other mazalos are being twisted around by, And that one you can't know unless you're in there. So when he told him Lech Lecha, it was basically a response to Avram's genius that if you want to understand like the secret of the true force which is driving all forces, you have to go there yourself. Lech Lecha. Anyway, from here, what are we trying to get in our mimer? Is that these blades of grass that are growing are not just stam growing because of what you see in the water that's planted and so forth. There's forces from the heavens, from the solar bodies. And we see this hinted to in the psukim we just read in Zos HaBracha, Meged Tvu Shamesh, Meged Geresh Rachim. Right? In the blessings of Yosef, it says that the crop grows from some crops grow from the sun, some crops grow from the moon. Excuse me, and that's just like hinting of those two particular solar bodies, but all the infinite solar bodies, what are they doing there, right? Nothing's just there for itself. Everything's created for the world and for the Jewish people, for the Torah. So all the infinite solar billions and trillions of stars, and you're saying, oh, it's infinite. It must mean that we're nothing, right? We're like some piece of dust in an infinite universe. The exact opposite is true. All those billions and billions and billions of stars, and so they're all there to basically, organize the light of God to filter to us. So like some random star and planet and universe is having its effect on this world specifically, and it's growing, your piece of grass. So you're meditating on this, you're realizing, wait a second, like everything that's happening in my world, it's actually stemming from the solar system. And then you go deeper into your meditations. Mazalos hemakablim me'ayin sarim. That those mazalos, all those physical, albeit supernal activities of the solar system, they themselves are just receiving from a higher spiritual force of energy, which are called the Ayin Sarim. You ever heard of the Ayin Sarim? Yeah. The 70 ministering angels, right? So the 70 ministering angels are they're not physical. Like the solar system is physical, albeit a higher level of physicality than we have here. But the 70 ministering angels which are above them are spiritual entities, which are essentially, just like the solar system runs what goes on here, these 70 ministering angels are running the solar system. The solar system is acting as an agent of them. And then those 70 ministering angels, they receive themselves from what's called the waste product of the Ofani. Right? What are the Ofanim? They're like the lowest level of angels, right? The Ofan is like a wheel. And when we're talking about the chariot, right, there's the idea of the man on the chariot, the seat of the chariot itself, and the wheels of the chariot. These are different like stages of angelic life force. The wheels means that it's the lowest because it touches the ground. And so then there's the waste product of those angels called wheels. What's the idea of a waste product? In like spirituality, why do people go to the bathroom?
These are above the 70 ministering.
They're above
angels.
The 70 ministering angels.
Okay, but they're still considered lowest level angel at their caliber.
Right,
okay.
But whatever's above them. In other words, because the 70 ministering angels are still, they're very much like engaged in the reality of this world. They're like slightly above this world. They're spiritual.
Are they physical?
No, they're spiritual, okay. But their whole function is that they're governing the world. So they're like they're the bridge between spirituality and physicality. So they still have like a foothold in physicality in a very strong way. They receive not only from the Ofani, the angels, but from the waste of the angels. What is the connotation that the angels like go to the bathroom, right? And why does anybody go to the bathroom? Is the idea is that when you eat something, you take in the parts that are
the sparks.
Well, the sparks, which is basically the parts that are of the food, which can nourish you and are aiding your system, right? And the parts that are basically the waste products means that it's a level of godliness, it's a level of creation or godliness which is too base in order to be internalized by your system, and you have to let it go. But for another world below you, that waste is actually life-giving sustenance. So that's why like manure is what used to be, it's probably still is like a high commodity, right? Because it grows everything. So for another lower life force, your waste is actually there like top of the food chain, right? So the idea is that the Ofanim, these lowest level angels, whatever they're experiencing that's coming to them, which is their godly perception, that's called their food. right? So they take in and internalize whatever is internalizable, and whatever is like too coarse and too base to be worthy of being in the realm of the Ophanim, they pass it through, and that becomes, so to speak, their waste product becomes the source energy of the 70 ministering angels.
Is that what an active symptom is? Like,
that's a symptom.
So the normal process by which from Atzilus to Yessia.
Yeah, it's all just going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
No, they used to. There's a mashpia came in. He said, so basically, when you see a big house and a beautiful swimming pool, it's just a big piece of, it's what it is. Yeah.
Relative to the world.
But yeah, and this is the way it works with your own system, right? Like the parts of the food, like the parts that can be useful for the brain, they go to the brain. That useful for the, what I'm saying, like everything takes whatever it can, and whatever the system doesn't require, that's what's called waste. So you're now thinking that you're meditating and davening, right? You had just like this schleppy day, and you're like dealing with all kinds of people in your world that are just troublesome, and then you start to meditate. Wait a second, what is it that I was dealing with over there before? Reality is every piece of grass is governed by the solar system, and the solar system itself is governed by the 70 ministering angels, and those ministering angels themselves are governed by the waste product, right, of the Ophani. And so he says, "V'gavoa me'al gavoa," and you start realizing, well, that's just the lowest levels of angels, the Ophanim. What about the Chayos HaKodesh and the Srafim, etc.? And you realize this goes on forever. Ad shekula mekablim b'chinas malchusu yizbarach. And where does it all start? From the Sphira of Malchus of Atzilus, right? That's like, because that's the gateway between God and creation. Malchus of Atzilus is called the mouth, right? Malchus pe Torah Shabbat pe Karina, like it says in Pasach Eliyahu, we call Malchus, the sphere of Malchus, the mouth of Hashem. Why the mouth? Because the mouth is like the gateway between the person and the outside world. So for Hashem, when he creates with speech. So whatever comes out of the mouth is, so to speak, exited Hashem, and that becomes creation. So when it comes out, it's still like this highfalutin, ridiculously high level of the Bria, which has to go from angel to angel to angel, which is basically, in another way of putting it, is letter combinations which get mixed together in many, many different combinations until they get lower and lower and lower and lower until they become the waste product of the angels, and then the 70 ministering angels, and then those same letter combinations, they descend until they become the solar system, and finally they become a blade of grass. Right? It all comes from, so you're meditating and you're realizing, where does this all come from? From Malchus of Atzilus, the mouth of Hashem, Kamoshekasu, Malchusacha, Malchus Kol Lamim. And that's the pasuk we sing in Ashrei, that your Malchus, Malchusacha, your sphere of Malchus, it's really the kingdom of all the worlds, because worlds don't even begin until you contract yourself into your mouth and, so to speak, existence out of you.
So we have a tremendous, we're the lowest point of like
everything
of like intended creation. Like we're the end product, but we have access to the higher chains by doing mitzvahs and davening and tefillah and doing all the different things that we do. We initiate and are part of and the product of the whole system.
Yeah. The whole system wouldn't have even been begun unless it was intending to get here. Because you don't start a job to finish in the middle, right? Hashem only made Atzilus and Bria and Yetzirah to begin with because he wanted to make Asiyah, right? So even though these things are higher than us, they're actually, and therefore you can see them as the cause of us. Like we only got here because of them. The reality is they're only here because of us. Because you only... Like, for example, the example for this is essentially a person, as we say, sof masev machshava techila, right? What was last indeed is really first in thought, right? So let's say your person's going to go build a new house. So what does he do? First, he has to clear the land, and he has to hire the workers, and he has to buy the building materials, and he has to get the blueprints, and he starts building. And at the very, very end, he puts on like his last doorbell, and it's finished, right? So you would say that what caused this thing to be there? The clearing of the land and the building of the materials and the hiring of the workers. That was like the cause of this beautiful thing. But that's not really true. This beautiful thing at the end is what he wanted in the beginning. And therefore, this beautiful thing in the end is actually what caused the clearing of the land and the building people and all the workers. So The actual physical world, which was the intention, is what initially caused Hashem to create the whole Seder Shishtalshus in the first place. So not only are we like sort of part of this thing, what we are the purpose of this whole thing. That's why I'm saying all those infinite stars, which to the untrained mind makes a person feel small, to a Torah observant person who realizes that all of the creation is there for the Jewish people, Har Sinai, it makes you feel extremely important that there's so many infinite stars because they're all there for you.
But I'm just like
you're just a piece chelek Eloka mimal mamish. That's what you are.
But like I'm just a human, bro. Like I just do things. Like
if you were just a human, this is what Michal and I had a nice debate about on Shabbos. If you were just a human, you're right. You just feel like another blade of grass, and the creation is not for you. But there's part of you that's not just a human. You're a chelek Eloka mimal mamish. You're a piece of God that's come into a physical form. And therefore, what you do, if you're doing Torah mitzvahs, is not just human stuff. Who made up tefillin? Who made up, bris milah? Who made up shooing away the mother bird? Who made up karbonos? They're not human things. You're not just doing something in creation. Hashem gave you the gift of being able to harness something exceedingly beyond creation through your human body. That's what makes you so important. It's not your good looks. Although you're a handsome fellow, I will say that.
Thank you. But your flattery will get you nowhere because I still have questions.
Okay.
I'm bound by human limitations.
No, you're not. Only when you're not doing Torah and mitzvahs.
So, but that's what I'm saying. Like,
if you were bound by human limitations, I'll just give you a very simple rule, right? If Omed Aleinu L'Chalosenu, in every generation, they stand up against us to destroy us, and they is the 70 nations, and all the wealth of the world, and all the military of the world, and all the hatred and anger of the world. If you were bound by human limitations, you wouldn't even be here right now. Okay. Jewish people, by their very presence, are a sign and like a signpost to the world that there's something which is not bound by human limitations, because a sheep among 70 wolves, according to nature, is dead 70 times.
But through the efforts of my lived existence and my observation of myself,
I know, knowing you, I know that that's also not true. According to your lived existence, you also should be dead, buddy.
True.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's call a spade a spade. Serious. Hashem is totally guides each and every one of us in a supernatural way. And if you go look back through your life, you realize how you got here does not make a grain of sense.
But then that means like I should be like relinquishing everything, like never smoke a cigarette ever again, never do anything that I ever want ever again, do like non-stop Torah mitzvahs.
If Hashem wanted that, he would have left it with the angels. He put him this godly soul inside of the lowest of the most disconnected animal form, because he wanted the Mayim Rabim to work to his advantage. The struggle that he gets, that he by putting you into this struggle, which the angels don't have, he actually gets more than he would get if he made it easy for you. And ultimately, it's even more than that. That why did he want to everything to come into this physical form? Okay, again, the Mayim is going into two reasons. One, because the struggle against your animal soul winds up bringing out powers of your godly soul that you would never have been able to bring out without those struggles. So it's worth it to put you into this scenario. And two, and which we didn't get to 100% yet, but the physicality itself is actually a medium which, even though it's considered the lowest, on many, many levels, it's considered infinitely higher than all the spiritual dimensions, because of its incomprehensibility. That the one thing that this place has, which no other place has, is a feeling of absolute independent I. And there's no greater sheker and falseness than that, because in reality, ein od milvado. There's nothing but him. And here he gave us, we're not like angels where we experience that we're being created by Hashem. We think we're completely independent, which makes us in the lowest world. On the other hand, that notion of total independence, the only other place that exists is with Hashem's own consciousness of himself. Anochi. So actually, our downfall makes us have a mirror for the ultimate essence of Hashem. So not only the physicality is not only there in order to come against you and bring out this resistance power, it's also because the physicality itself is just higher than spirituality. And ultimately, when we refine ourselves, that's what will be revealed in the days of Tchias HaMesim.
So
That this medium, it's not just the lowest, there's a reason why it was first in thought.
So the whole illusionary concept of this world, like I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I roll over and I'm like, I really just want to fall asleep and set my alarm to like 7 o'clock and then just wake everyone up as I have to. And I was like, no, I'm going to get up. I'm going to go to the mikvah.
Right.
I'm going to do the morning bracha.
Right.
I'm going to do what I need to
Right.
do in order to like wake the day properly. And so I start by going to the mikvah and having a shower and doing all the right things and not like
Your soul above could never bring out such a koach.
But the actual experience of doing that, it's just like mundane, getting up, getting dressed, davening, going to the mikvah, and then coming back and then getting ready for Chassidut. Like that's all just like, to me, it feels like devoid of anything magical or powerful or majestic or monumental. I don't wake up and I'm like, I'm changing the world, and I'm doing like some rectification in the world by doing those things.
But you have to understand that too is a sign of the ultimate highest level. In other words, if you can experience excitement, what you're basically grasping is something experienceable, right? If you get it and you're like all wowed about it and it gives you a motivation, like it's exciting, you understand. It means you're dealing with a certain level of godliness which can be understood. It can be felt, which is great. Mazel tov. You must be a happy guy. But it's also a sign that you're not dealing with the infinite God. Because the infinite God is by definition beyond your understanding, beyond your ability to feel. It's something which is so profound that it does not enter into the grasping sensors of a created being. And yet that is also available for us specifically in this world. And it's when you don't feel it. It's when you do something by pure will, which does not excite you. But it's godly, but it's a level of godliness which is not where so to speak, where the light is, it's where the darkness is, and that's when you turn the darkness into light. When you realize that even the mundane reality, which is not exciting, which is therefore incomprehensible that it's godliness, you bring godliness there too. Which is ultimately the highest level of godliness, because now your hands are on not a ray of divinity, which is merely a contracted level. That's why you understand it, but the essence of divinity, which is beyond comprehension. And what you're complaining because you don't understand it.
So
can you draw?
So the lack of understanding is like, aha, I got it.
Right.
I don't got it.
Now, when you realize that the lack of understanding is itself a blessing, that's when you become a Hasidic Jew. That motivational factor that you are aware of the unknown, like this thing that Jews just had Kabbalah soul and we just did it. We didn't really know why and why that was so important. Chassidus is even bringing that to light, and that's the idea of bringing that which is unknowable to becoming known. It's that's the ultimate level. Just being aware that the mundane reality is so unbelievable. That's something new. That's that's the Hasidic gift.
Okay.
That we can take pleasure in nothing. That's why, for example, just coming from Chag HaSukkos, right? This is the whole story of the Nisuch HaMayim. So what's the great simcha about water? The whole story of Sukkot is that we're getting excited about water, not wine, because wine is taste. Of course you're going to get excited about wine. Taste, understanding, you get it. To get excited about water, really, it was just an incomprehensible thing throughout the ages. Okay, we're going to pour the water. All the sages are going to dance. We don't really understand why. Now we know why. The tasteless, not understandable thing, if you get the story behind it, it's more simchadik than that which you taste. Because it's in a plane which is beyond comprehension, which has no taste. That means it's holding the essence of Hashem. And if you can realize that, then you can actually have a joy which is beyond comprehension. It's an incomprehensible joy. There's no reason to be so joyous because you're holding on to the unreasonable Hashem.
Okay. Can you draw a parallel? Earlier you were saying that because we're at this lowest level that we feel like we're independent, that mirrors the state of Hashem, which also is the only other entity which is independent.
Yeah.
Then all the other angels, when they serve Hashem, they do it with excitement because they see towards.
Right.
They feel that there's the oneness.
That's right.
That they're connected, and it's an experiential thing.
Mm-hmm.
So Can you draw a parallel to say this is also why we don't feel excitement when we do what we do? Because in a way it's like Hashem doing his own service,
Right.
in a way, right?
Exactly.
Whereas the angels, they're happy, they see who they're serving, and it's if Hashem was to do his, it's like he's the only independent.
Right.
But like
That's why. Yeah.
But there has to be a difference though. Like when you go like all the way down and you get to us, and then it somehow mirrors back to the independent experience that Hashem. There needs to be a difference though. It can't be one of the same. Surely
It is. It's not one of the same. It's a kli. It's a kli, meaning to say that it's like, what dimension can hold the essence of God, right? So it's not to say that my understanding of I is Hashem's understanding of I, because my understanding of I is completely falsehood. It's like I understand myself to be independent because I'm so far away from the truth. But it's a kli. It's a vessel which can at least hold the true I if I do a mitzvah with it. Whereas the angels, they don't have Torah mitzvahs. They don't have mitzvahs because they're not a kli. Because they have so much light and they define themselves by how much they understand, and there's no concept of not understanding by them. There's no concept of I by them. Therefore, the true I can never dwell with them. That's what it says, like, all the angels were running around asking each other, where's Hashem, where's Hashem? They said he's with Moshe Rabbeinu in the Ohel Moed. That's the only place that can hold him. Because it's such a low world, it has the false sense of I and a disconnect. If you use that for Hashem, it can be, and it's the only kli for the true essence of Hashem. That's why this world was the intended world, because it's the only place that can hold Hashem's essence.
Is this
but the trade-off is you can't feel it.
Of course. But is this the root of when we say that when you're going to do a mitzvah, even if you seem that you're getting your ego mixed into it,
right?
Then you have to still, because truth, the real essence is that Hashem is doing it.
That's right.
So like if you're giving money and you're scared that you're going to have gratitude, like that's
Where's
the only
Michal?
real
We were just
way.
talking about this last night. Yes.
That's the only real way. Right?
Even when you're doing it, so to speak, for not altruistic reasons,
really
essentially it's altruistic because it's something it's not yours. You didn't make tefillin up. You didn't make up bris. You're not like doing something with your big brains that you figured out. No, you're just like nothing. You're just doing the action because Hashem said that's a kli for me. So you're infinitely bittul just by doing any mitzvah.
But then the whole point of bittul is not removing the idea that I am doing this. Is seeing the I am doing this as a kli.
Right.
Of Hashem doing it. Amazing.
All right, moving right along. Get a little sidetracked there. We lost a few friends in the class. Coming back to the mimer.
Where are we on?
We're going to be on 5 lines down. Okay, so after all the meditation that the grasses come from the planets and the planets come from the 70 ministering angels, which themselves come from the waste parts of the Ophanim, and then higher and higher and higher until you get to the, so to speak, the top of this, which is actually the bottom of another system called Malchus of Atzilus. Malchusacha Malchus Kol Mim. The mouth of Hashem is the peak of creation. Kol Olamos Shemahave Es Kola Olamos. Over there is where he brings forth into existence all the worlds. Me'ayin liyesh mamish. Literally something from nothing. They didn't have a previous state of existence. They were in a state of negation. It was only Hashem. And all of a sudden, there's just they exist. And what that is just a ray. What comes out, so to speak, and gives them and is powering the existence of all these angels in creation is not Hashem himself. It's just a ray. It's just a little tiny ray, merely a mere ray alone. Compared to the true essence of Hashem, kiviyachol, so to speak, which is really, now when he says the Ein Sof, the essence of Hashem, what's he really talking about is the world of Atzilus. He's not even talking about the essence of Hashem. He's just saying, compared to creation, which is a speech out of the mouth of Atzilus, Atzilus itself is called the essence, where it's because it is Ein Sof, right? It doesn't have like parts and it's not divisible, so to speak. It's it's past, present, and future as one without any change. So in other words, when he speaks creation, obviously he speaks it, one thing comes out and after the next and after the next. So once he speaks creation, it's already engendered time and space because the ray has a top, has a bottom, has a middle, the top is bigger, right? So there's already like the whole notion of like structure when the ray comes out. But before that, It's Havaya. Haya hove v'yiyeh ke'echad. It's past, present, and future is one. That's what he means. It's like it's the essence. And that's what we say that Hashem. We say this every morning before davening. You are He who was before creation, and you are He who was after creation, without any change. What does that even mean? That's that we could sit on that statement for years, right? What we're saying is that creation did not apply any change to Hashem, as though nothing happened, right? So what is all this? Hashem, you're exactly the same before you created the world and after you created the world. Does anyone understand what that means or how that's possible? Isn't creation like something that seemingly took place, in which case Hashem is not exactly the same from before it took place for after it took place, because something took place, right? How does that make sense? We say it every morning. Are you lying? You say you are as before creation, as after creation, exactly the same. Nothing happened. How do we explain that?
I have a feeling that's because Hashem is everything and nothing. He is the infinite and the finite. It doesn't detract or take or give or anything to.
So what does it mean? He
Hashem.
spoke. He spoke as seemingly something happened.
Yeah, but that's an action in his will. Because we can't understand Hashem through actually being, because to say that he spoke then means, does he have a mouth? He doesn't have anything. He is.
But if we say
some of nothing.
If we say he's before creation and he's after creation, we're already putting him in a linear
seemingly
paradigm.
Yeah. How do we understand this? So this is actually one of the great meditations of the Tanya, chapter 20-21 of the Tanya. And he basically explains it like this. He says that the words that come out of your mouth, right? Before they came out of your mouth,
They're eternal.
oh, let's see what you guys are in the middle of here. Where are you guys going?
He's saying that when we daven and we do tefillah, it's like we're kissing Hashem mouth to mouth, we're interfacing with Hashem. The same way that Hashem took us out of Egypt with his hand.
He does have things as well, to him.
No, but that's just
with his strong right hand, he removed us out of Egypt.
So essentially, but still, you're still in the realm of saying that something happened, and that therefore there was a change.
I didn't say that. I'm just saying. I'm
saying, according to that description, something happened. There was a change. Existence is real, and when it was all of a sudden it's there. Before it wasn't there, and therefore seemingly Hashem is not the same before creation and after creation. That's what it seems like, right? And so what is the statement that we say every morning where he's the same before creation and after creation? How does that actually make sense? Yehonatan, you following along this conversation?
Yeah.
Okay. So how does it make sense? So in the Tanya, he explains, right, and it was Hayahu Veviyih, means everything
already happened there.
He just made it seem like it was a separate. Okay, exactly. There's a was, is, and will be, which is all happening at the same time, but you see that's already there. So what it really means is that not what you think is that what seems to be is that there was a time when there was no creation, and suddenly there's a time there was creation. And that's what seems to be this change. It turns out there was never a time when there was no creation. That's why Hashem is the same before creation, after creation, because creation is eternal. It's just that creation in its previous state was in a state of Haya Hove V'Yihya, which means past, present, and future were all happening at the same time, which means they didn't really come out of the box yet. They weren't developed. It was in a state of negation, a state of nothingness. So when Hashem actually, the Tanya's metaphor for this is when a person speaks, and the words come out of your mouth. Before those words came out of your mouth, they were in your thoughts, right? The same words existed in a thought form. And before they were in your thoughts, they were in your emotions, which they weren't even verbal at that point. They were inside of your emotions. If you would figure out how to express your emotions, it would come out in letters. And before they were in your emotions themselves were in your intellect. And before your intellect even got born, it itself was inside of your will, right? And before your will even came out, the will itself is still an expression of the essential soul. So where are those letters? Before in their original source, they're inside the thought, which are themselves inside of the emotions, inside of the intellect, inside of the will, inside of the soul. So the state of those letters before they come out is in a state of absolute oneness with the essential soul. And them coming out is not a product which is new. It's not an add-on. It's actually a subtraction. If I will remove many layers, so that the letters surface from their hiddenness inside of the will, inside of the intellect, inside of the emotions, inside of the thought. So if I remove all those overlaying levels of godliness, which are so massive that they negate the drop of water, which is like these letters inside. So then all of a sudden it'll appear as though creation happened. So creation is not that something took place. Creation is actually that something was removed. Yeah. That the experience of the will had to hide, and the experience of the intellect had to hide, the experience of the emotions had to hide, the thought had to hide, and all of a sudden Hashem says, okay, after I remove the presence of all those things, then you can see these letters. But the reality is, even though Hashem spoke, says the Tanya, he only spoke as a metaphor to explain what it seems like to us. In reality, those letters that he spoke are still presently inside of his thought, which is inside of his emotion, which is inside of his intellect, which is inside of his will, which is inside of his essence, because it never actually came out, because he only removed those things as far as we are concerned. But as far as he's concerned, those letters are still inside of his will, inside of his essence, which means he did not change. Because the exact same world which was there before is there now, just we're seeing it in a linear pattern. Because he's removing certain overwhelming levels of revelation, but he's not removing themselves from him. They're still there in full. He's just removing our ability to see them. So creation is not a thing that happened as though like he added something to himself. It's actually a symptom. He withheld certain things from being seen, and suddenly to us it appears as though there's a world.
What about we're making it come out in a way when we're doing the speech, because we're being the conduit then for his speech, which is eternal, which is in its primal constant state, and if we're then using our bodies and our intellect and our
I'm not sure you could say we're making it come out. I mean, we're not responsible for experiencing ourselves.
When we're reading tefillah, when we're saying godly things.
When we're reading tefillah and saying godly things, not we're making the world be. We're making that world which he's making be overlaid with deeper levels of those things that were contracted. So like we bring back levels of the symptom, which in other words, there's levels of divinity in this room that we can't see. Many levels. All these levels. This solar system, the ministering angels, the Ophanim, all of them are like basically like right. We're inside of them. It seems like they're out there somewhere, but actually we're inside of them. When we do Torah mitzvahs, he removed our ability to see that. So when we do Torah mitzvahs, we basically open up layer after layer of the divinity that we're inside of, and we sort of allow those deeper makif levels of godliness to have a placeholder here. That's what Torah mitzvahs is basically. But you had a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you explain when like the case of where like Hashem changed his mind, like where like Moshe constantly having to like tell Hashem not to become Jews because like Hashem's going to kill them. He's like, no, don't. And like he changes his mind. Or even in Pashas Noach with the rainbow, like Hashem's thinking of darkness, destruction, and he has to send himself a reminder, like don't do
So
this.
all of that was part of the original story. In Haya Hove V'Yihyeh, right? In past, present, and future, you can see that it looks like something was like this and then it changed. But when all of that was happening at the same time, like what like Einstein calls it like the space-time continuum. It's a static thing. We're traveling through it like a time traveler. So you're like, oh, yesterday was different than today. But the whole thing is already sitting there, which means it, in principle, already had all those changes inside of it. And therefore, they're not really changes, right? Mm-hmm. If your whole life could be seen like a movie, Chas v'shalom, people say after a person passes away, they see their whole life as a movie. So you can see the beginning and the end of the movie at the same time. So you say, this, when I grew a beard, look, what a big change. You're like, well, if I step back, it's not a change in the ultimate story because the story itself had me with no beard and then me with the beard. That's not called change. That's what it was always. Eternally, it's like that. Because again, Hashem's only showing us slice by slice of the eternal truth in a temporal fashion. So we get all confused by that and we think that things are changing, but really we're part of like a static, eternal reality.
You can say if Hashem created time and space, he literally created time and space. So before he created time, there was no time.
Right.
So therefore, time and space was always created because it's eternal. Like before time.
Right.
Okay. And you were saying we're like a time traveler, but we are time travelers.
Yeah.
You can only go forward. You can't go back.
Right. We can only go forward. Exactly. Well, meanwhile,
Right. Yeah.
Am I real?
Come on, man. Let's finish the mimer.
Am I real?
You are real. Because
No.
it says Bereshis bara Elokim.
You don't-
You're real because the Torah says that this is real. I know that there's other opinions in Torah. Hasidus Chabad holds that this is not an illusion. It's actually happening. It's real.
Can you say you're not real but you matter?
Hold on. Let's move on. Let's get deeper in. We're getting lost. Right? So what we're saying is all these worlds come into existence, nothing from something. Right? You had this whole meditation, and it ends off with the realization that Hashem is exactly the same before the world was created and after the world was created. That's you're busy, like you just like we're doing your gardening, you get into your davening, grass, angels, and all of a sudden you come to this realization that the whole existence is basically like eternal and nothing's ever changed, and this is where you are, right? Because remember, this is Alter Rebbe. So when he's busy, oftentimes in the Alter Rebbe's Mayim, this happens. He's busy explaining something, and he just sort of like drifts into like a meditation, and you have to remember that you're like in the middle of a mimer, because he wanted you to go have the experience that he was talking about what you're supposed to be doing in davening. It's not exactly like linearly part of the mimer. So right, he's just saying, okay, so now you had that experience, right? Now, after you had that meditation, ba'omek hadas, with the depth of your das, your soul is aroused with a wondrous longing, like a burning fire, to get out of this complete lie of this physical world. Like right after we just got through what we're saying, it's like you literally asked the question, am I real? Right? And that's the perfect result of like where you should get with this. Like you should be like demanding truth. Like, why am I in this situation where I have to ask, am I real? Because I want to be part of reality. Right? And Hashem has thrown me in this darkness where like my whole experience seemingly is like this imagined, I could even think that I'm not even real because it's so many contractions and such a falseness, and it's like this thing is a joke, right? I'm not having a real existence. That meditation is supposed to bring you right there to the point that you want to be attached to the real existence. You want to be where truth is.
But can't you say
I want to continue a little bit. And to cling to Hashem. Kamosha Kasav, and this is like sort of the famous line of the Alter Rebbe. He would constantly be saying this to the point that he would roll around on the floor in ecstatic ecstasy saying this line. And there was actually, there was a famous story of Pinchas writes this, that it was his number one, scribe, and he would actually roll around on the floor with him to like make sure he got everything he was saying while he was busy rolling. And he would say, Mi liba shamayim be'imecha lo chafatzti. That what comes out of this is, and again, a soul in heaven will never say this line. Only when you're in physicality and you feel pushed away and foreign, and then you have to come to the realization, am I even real? Then you say, Mi liba shamayim be'imecha lo chafatzti. Who do I have in heaven? And with you, I do not desire. Which is like a code word for basically saying that heaven is not going to satisfy me. And something which is merely with you, as opposed to you, I don't want it anymore. Because you're not going to get excited anymore about the whole Seder Ishtalshlus, because even though they're angels and you're merely physical, there's not much difference between them and you. They're also just a ray. They're just a little bit higher ray, so they're like a slightly larger piece of poo, right? Whatever it is. But like, you can't, what once might have got you excited about revelations, right? That you just want to feel more godliness, and you want to have more intellectual understanding. Was it something I said? Right? Now, all that, when you've come to a proper realization of how you got here, that all of that revelation and realization is also just merely a ray. You're like, I didn't come down here just to get like a higher slot in the Seder Ishtalshlus, which is all nothing coming out of Hashem's mouth, which thinks itself to be real. If I'm already realizing what I'm doing here, and I want you. The heavens don't concern me anymore. And with you, something which is secondary to you, I only want the essence. This is an attitude and realization that you can only get to having come down this low. Because when you are sitting in heaven, you're not bothered by the state of the Seder Ishtalshlus, because it's working to your favor. You're seeing light. You're experiencing revelation. It never goes away. Because you don't have to go to work the next day and get lost and say, what's this all for? Right? Because you're in heaven and you're experiencing constant revelation. So you never get pissed off about the situation where you're like, where is this all coming from? I want back to the source. That never happens. So only when you are like after like work and you go into davening and you have a moment of meditation, that's Noah's Ark, right? That's all of a sudden you like get lifted up by these flood waters. Shaloyach pots klal. You don't want anything anymore. Lo b'gan eden atachton v'lo b'gan eden elyon. I don't want your lower Gan Eden. I don't want your higher Gan Eden. Why? Shehem rak b'china ziv ha'ara bilvad. Because all of that is just rays. So I'm a lower part of the ray. You're a higher part of the ray. Shkoyach. I'm not. Even your billions don't excite me because it's nothing compared to true essence. You're just part of the Seder Ishtalshlus. And you can look right in the Torah as a proof. It says that tzaddikim, when they go to heaven, they're only benefiting from the ray of the Shekhinah. What do I want? I want essence. Get me out of this ray. I don't want to be in this little time space continuum traveling in this ridiculous state, even if I'm in a higher state. I want to be joined. Put me before the mouth. Before it comes out, before it separates, before it becomes a ray. And this is what's called in the Zohar HaKodesh, Lishtav B'gufa D'Malka. I want to hug the body of the king. I don't want to be benefiting from the words of the king, which comes out of his mouth, which is a mere ray. This love is called tshuva. I want to return to source. Which is a greater power than you could have in the higher world. They don't have tshuva. They don't really want to return to source because they're happy where they are. Nothing bothers them to get out of their complacency. Even though they're only dealing with a sliver of godliness, it's more than enough for them. It's only when you come to darkness and you realize where this sliver ends, and it ends in like mama's realization that you have nothing. This is not God. This sliver, you're excited because you happen to be one of the rich ones. But trust me, if you get into this pathway where you're just dealing with a sliver of God, it ends off being nothing. It gets completely devoid of godliness at the end of this line. And so when you get down to the bottom, you realize the concept of return. I want to get back to the truth. You're like a part of creation which is more or less satisfied with your creation. I got into an area of creation where I'm dealing with Gashmias. It's become so low and so contracted, it's literally a blade of grass. It's not like the theoretical blade of grass inside of Hashem. It's a blade of grass. And this requires me to realize that I don't want any rays. If the rays lead here, get me out of all rays. And we see that this tshuva quality comes from being so low and therefore we see that the benefit, the advantageous light comes specifically from the darkness, right? That the flood waters ultimately are responsible for lifting you higher than you could have gone without them. This type of love is called loving Hashem with all your might, all your everything, right? This type of love cannot be achieved by the higher worlds, and your soul, when it's in Gan Eden, cannot love Hashem b'chol miodecha. You can only love Hashem with all your heart and all your soul, but with b'chol miodecha, only with this world. Shu bli gevul mamish, because what does b'chol miodecha mean? It means going beyond yourself, right? That you're basically, like you're saying this morning, you get up, you want to stay in bed, but you don't. That's called going beyond yourself, like getting out of your own limitations of your physical self. You don't have that inclination when bed is a bed of roses and it's like divine light all around you, and that no one's asking any more from you than that, right? You don't have like a mandate to go do mitzvahs and be better, right? You're called the holy animals. Right, your nefesh Bahama is called like an animal. It's like a bad term. But the chayos hakodesh, the angels themselves are called animals. On the chariot, it's the ox and the lion and the eagle. They're not. No one's telling them they're bad guys because they're animals. They're like the divine, perfect animals. They're allowed to be animals. They're just like wallowing around in their animal glory. Right? They never go b'chol miodecha. They never have to undo their nature and do something not animalistic, which is being asked of them. We do, and therefore, because the animal becomes such a coarse thing that it's not an animal that's allowed to just behave any old way it wants anymore. It's gone through so many levels of contraction. It's actually animalistic, and it's bad. And now it has to stop being an animal. So you have to do something which is beyond your nature suddenly. Such a thing does not exist in the higher world. And therefore you get to access this thing called B'chol Miodecha, going beyond yourself. Shabbat dafka hafuch. You can only go beyond yourself when there's darkness and something you have to overcome. And that's what it says in the Zohar, this bizarre line. It says, Kamosha Kasuv, Tov ze malach hachayim. Tov mi'od ze malach hamavis. There's actually a statement like this. It's a crazy thing. It's like a Zohar. You need the Zohar to understand it. It says, good, that's the angel of life. Very good is the angel of death. Now, why very? Ma'od. Right? It's exactly what we just explained. To get to the level of called B'chol mi'odecha, you need the angel of death. You need something bad. You need something to oppose, because that's the only way you're going to get out of your nature, to do something like to leave your limitations. Because the animal, as we have it in this world, is death. It's leading you down a very bad path. It's leading you to death. It wants to kill you. So you have to oppose it, right? You have to go against it. You don't ever have to do that in the higher worlds. And therefore, the angel of death is called Tov Mi'od, because it allows this level of Mi'od to surface, to go against your nature. By dealing with the opposite and the darkness specifically, which is the animal soul, as it is as an actual like nasty beast in this world, not in its angelic state. Through that, that's the only way to love Hashem with all your might, because you have to break away from this beast, which is literally bli gevul mamash. When you touch something which is outside of your limitations, you trigger that which is beyond the limitations of everything. That's what we're saying. You're saying, like, what am I, little human? What can I accomplish over here, right? But the reality is that it goes together with this thing that the eye of this world is a kli for the true eye of Hashem. That when you go b'chol miyodecha, which is, it doesn't say b'chol miyodechem. B'chol miyodecha means it's a singular, which means each one has their own limitations. For another guy getting up and with the alarm clock, might not be a challenge anymore, right? So for him, he's got to get up 3 hours early to get that b'chol miyodecha. But it's a singular, which means if you're going against your own private limitations, you suddenly reveal that which is beyond limitation be'emes. Like, in other words, Hashem also has limited aspects of himself and unlimited aspects of himself. When you go beyond your private limitations, you trigger and become a kli for that which is truly beyond limitation. And you bring mamash infinite Ein Sof light. So our little actions as humans, we have no idea how powerful and unbelievably powerful they are. This is the whole Basi Lagani, by the way. The first Mayim of the Rebbe, and the last Mayim of the Frierdiker Rebbe, is basically talking about how overcoming your Yetzer Hara brings down a light which is higher than all the world. Something that you don't have to change the world and be some kind of a big shot to change the world and become some kind of a big shot. Because every little act of overcoming your Yetzer Hara is mamish, groundbreaking, completely transforms the entire creation. Hainu, and why is that? The fish is shorsha lamayla shorash nefesh bahamish gavoa yosem bechinas nefesh elukis. And this is because, and we're going to end off on this pithy statement we're going to spend a long time tomorrow trying to unpack. It's because the source in the very root of the animal soul is actually higher than the source of the godly soul. In other words, the reason why the Malach HaMavis, which is the animal soul, is involved with Tov Mi'od, it's like it's the catalyst for reaching B'chol Mi'odecha, is because in truth, the animal soul, the darkness, right, actually has a higher source than the godly soul, than the light. And that's why the godly soul is willingly ready to come down millions of miles into physicality to go get mixed in with it, because it's not going down. It's actually going up, because the source of the animal soul comes from a higher place than the godly soul. And the only way the godly soul can get its hands on that source is by going and finding it down in this physical world. So he willingly puts himself into this situation because now he's got his hands on a level which is higher than himself, it's the animal soul. This is why God put us in physical bodies, and for 13 years you don't even have a godly soul. You just develop your animal soul for 13 years because ultimately it is more powerful and comes from a higher source than your godly soul. We'll leave it for tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem.
Whoa!